Many preconditions to totalitarianism exist in the United States. Progressive income tax, decline of the power of the individual states, and the rise of a bloated bureaucracy. But because of our political culture, those who would like to replace the Constitution and alter the structure of our republic are approaching their object in a circuitous fashion, otherwise known as serpentine. Zbigniew Brzezinski, one and the same, circuitous serpentine. Former National Security Advisor and one of the architects of the Trilateral Commission, an international power elite policy-making group, addressed this prospect in his book, Between Two Ages. He said the approaching 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence could justify a call for a national constitutional convention to re-examine the nation's formal institutional framework. Either 76 or 89, the 200th anniversary of the Constitution could serve as a suitable target date for culminating a national dialogue on the relevance of existing arrangements. He personally does not believe the Constitution relevant to his designs for the course of American history. So he wants a dialogue. As the serpents say, let's talk. They always want to discuss so that point by point, finally through their dialectical materialism, they can arrive at the premise and the conclusion of their design. A dialogue on the relevance of existing arrangements, the workings of the representative process, and the desirability of imitating the various European regionalization reforms and of streamlining the administrative structure. So many words to say, let's throw out the Constitution and remake the American government so that the power elite can rule the world. He goes on with more words saying, more important still, either date would provide a suitable occasion for redefining the meaning of modern democracy, a task admittedly challenging, but not necessarily more so than when it was undertaken by the Founding Fathers, and for setting ambitious and concrete social goals. Realism, however, forces us to recognize that the necessary political innovation will not come from direct constitutional reform, desirable as that would be. The needed change is more likely to develop incrementally and less overtly. He is saying we won't get away with it obviously and directly, so we'll do it little by little, in hidden ways and underneath, until one fine day the people wake up and it is a fait accompli. World regionalism, a one-world government, not of and by and for the people, not to guarantee the individual access to Almighty God, but to guarantee the government of, by, and for the power elite, who we have unmasked and exposed as the godless Nephilim, Watcher, fallen angels, who have sought to take over the earth, but will not take over the earth because the legions of freedom are on the march. Incremental change, such as Big envisions, is already taking place in many ways. This is the wearing away of resistance. Psychologists understand this, the shock factor. First, we are shocked at the loss of a liberty, and then it becomes commonplace. And then we no longer care because it is very difficult to sustain a fighting momentum, a soldier's pace, a watchman's vigil, all the time, year in, year out, all of one's life. But that is the meaning of being a creative, career son of God. Your vigil is never, never abandoned. Your guard is not let down because your ascension is at stake. And with your ascension, the rise of all who follow you on the path of your own soul freedom. Incremental change. Watch. Watch the change and put your foot down and do not allow it to pass in your community. During the Carter administration, virtually every important cabinet post was filled by members of the Trilateral Commission, a body of individuals dedicated to international world government at the expense of the individual. The individual must be expendable on planet Earth if the power elite are to have an unlimited dictatorship. The Commission is like a political action committee for international bankers, such as David Rockefeller, and big businessmen from the US, Western Europe, and Japan. So well was the Trilateral Commission represented in the Carter administration. The President, Vice President, Secretaries of State and Defense, National Security Advisor, among them. It was viewed by some as a coup. Others were indifferent to such a turn of events. One of the qualities of the Buddha that is described as the point and power of the 3 times 3 is indifference. Let us not abuse that term or its understanding. Let us not consider that we must withdraw from life in order to have high spiritual attainment. There is no indifference on the part of Gautama Buddha to this very plot against humanity. There can be no ignorance of absolute evil by those who have espoused the cause of absolute good. We cannot be indifferent to incremental change. While there are some trilateral commissioners, such as Caspar Weinberger, Secretary of Defense, serving in the Reagan administration, they are not as numerous as they were in the Carter administration. But they serve alongside members of its sister organization, the Council on Foreign Relations. Secretary of State George Shultz, for example, is the director of the CFR, as the Council is known. Brzezinski sees the shift of power away from the people to policy planning groups. In other words, the experts should rule society. And we will see that the little people do not become the experts by limiting their education and making it so poor that they cannot lift their heads. They cannot read or write or spell or communicate or even speak or formulate logical ideas and conclusions for the practical self-government which they have inherited. This is the control behind the decay in education in America today. It is not something that just happened. It was plotted in hell against the people of this land. And the true education must be and ought to be and is the education of the heart, the education of the threefold flame, the drawing down of that Christ potential. I can tell you something about 5-year-olds at Montessori International. They know the power of the spoken word, and they know God answers their calls. They know what it means to work with angels to solve problems. They know what it means to feel the fire and fervor of freedom in their hearts. They know who is the I am that I am. And this will stay with them as long as they live, wherever they go, because these are their childhood prayers, their childhood contact with the living word. And Maria Montessori told us how devotional is the nature of the little child. And Lenin knew it also. Thus we realize that there can be the training of the Christ consciousness, and we must do more towards it. We can give our children more than we are giving them in independent exercises in leadership, more in their understanding of the age of technology and their place in the world. And we will keep on probing and receiving the light of revolution in education. We will not let our people be uninformed and uneducated so that they are intimidated by the fallen ones who are educated academically and intellectually but have no heart and therefore cannot make a heart decision for America, the heart nation of the world. Brzezinski says technological developments make it certain that modern society will require more and more planning. Deliberate management of the American future will become widespread. He is very open about saying we, the power elite, are determined to manage the people, to plan the future. with the planner eventually displacing the lawyer as the key social legislator and manipulator. End of quote. Sons and daughters of God are the most likely individuals to be the planners for their families, for their communities, for their businesses, for their nations. Sons and daughters of God being able to access the cosmic computer of the cosmic Christ can draw forth a creative and innovative way of life, and they do not need the power elite to plan their present, their future, and beyond the grave into the next world. For this is their goal: absolute, total control, inner space, outer space, and beyond all technological revolution. They want to control the soul of the people for eternity. And because we take our stand physically in this hour of our final incarnation, we will see to it that we raise our hand with the Buddha and say, "Thus far and no farther." Planet Earth will be the nemesis of the fallen angels. They will be sorry they ever took it on. If we are to reverse the pattern of the erosion of our freedoms, we must now assess the will to dominate on the part of the power elite in light of the will to freedom and individuality on the part of the American people. We must also examine the methods of tyranny. How much do the people want freedom? How much does the power elite want to control? And who has the greater will? Who has the greater determination? The people have a will to be free, but it is not focused by Christ's illumination. They do not understand freedom, what it means to be free, or how to defend their freedom. They do not understand that the manipulation of prices is equal to the erosion of spiritual and soul freedom within. They do not understand the as above, so below, the inner-outer action, that every freedom lost in the physical is a loss of freedom on the inner. It's a loss of integrity. It's a loss of the exercise of God consciousness. The people have the will, but the power elite have the expertise, and therefore their will is more focused. They know the vulnerability of people, and they know what that vulnerability can be, and therefore they program the people psychologically to their own weaknesses, and they trip them up every time. Thus far and no farther. For the sons of freedom are on the march, the daughters of freedom are ready, and we are determined now to give the education of the heart to all people of our society, and to challenge this base injustice of the taking from the people the illumination of their own hearts, putting a shroud over their own heart flame so that they cannot see even the light of their own faces shining and reflecting the light of their own Christ self. The separation of the people from reality is the modus operandi of the fallen ones, and they have created a mass unreality and subjected the people to it. Throughout all history, despotic rulers have employed various means to keep civilian populations under control. The use of secret police, the relocation of captured populations, perpetual war, the control of foodstuffs, limitations on travel, and the manipulation of the economy were among the ways that rulers maintain power. Sometimes their methods are overt, sometimes they are subtle. But the bottom line of tyranny is the suppression and finally the destruction of the individual soul, the individual mind and heart. We have an effective means to limit the power of the state and the power elite. Our Constitution, we still have it. They have not taken it from us. But there is a general lack of understanding of our own system. When accompanied by a decline in the will to maintain our liberties, it is only a matter of time before our freedoms dissipate. They evaporate. They go back to the source whence they came, which is heaven. Freedom is a gift of heaven. Its home is heaven. And in the presence of tyranny, it flies away like a bird of paradise and a bird that's free. We need to realize that to anchor freedom, we must anchor God consciousness. And we know the law of the science of the spoken word. Every single day we repeat our prayers, because each 24-hour cycle we must renew that flame. So it is with freedom. It goes back to its natural octave. While some people have a strong drive to attain freedom, psychologist Erich Fromm has observed a widespread tendency for people to flee from freedom. People are afraid of freedom, afraid of what they might do, afraid of what they might not do, afraid to take care of themselves, afraid to be alone in a universe. Have you ever been absolutely alone in a territory wide and vast, where you could hear or see no other soul, no other physical person? How long could you maintain individuality in absolute aloneness? Thus, there is a fleeing from freedom for many reasons, and sometimes, especially when people have freedom. He wrote a book called Escape from Freedom, and in it he pointed out the principles of economic liberalism, political democracy, religious autonomy, and individualism in personal life. That these gave expression to the longing for freedom, and at the same time seemed to bring mankind nearer to its realization. The abolition of external domination seemed to be not only a necessary but also a sufficient condition to attain the cherished goal, freedom of the individual. He says, World War I was regarded by many as the final struggle, and its conclusion the ultimate victory for freedom. Existing democracies appeared strengthened, and new ones replaced old monarchies. But only a few years elapsed before new systems emerged, which denied everything that men believed they had won in centuries of struggle. For the essence of these new systems, which effectively took command of man's entire social and personal life, was the submission of all but a handful of men to an authority over which they had no control. While recognizing that despotic leaders such as a Hitler or a Stalin deprive people of freedom, he was aware that, as John Dewey said, the serious threat to our democracy is not the existence of foreign totalitarian states. It is the existence within our own personal attitudes and within our own institutions of conditions which have given a victory to external authority, discipline, uniformity, and dependence upon the leader in foreign countries. The battlefield is also accordingly here, within ourselves and our institutions. Fromm, historian Arnold Toynbee, and others have noticed the tendency for entire populations, when faced by difficult circumstances, to capitulate and hence turn their back on the responsibility of freedom. The rise of an authoritarian or even a totalitarian figure can be a great relief to a populace willing to relinquish their freedoms to someone who will assume the responsibilities for life. Fromm likened this to the drive to get rid of the individual self, to lose oneself, in other words, to get rid of the burden of freedom. The ancient prophet speaks about the burden of the Lord. The burden of the Lord is his light, his mantle, and the office of being his servant. The responsibility for freedom is immense. The responsibility for decision-making. I have experienced my own self weariness in decision-making from morning to night. And from time to time, I have desired and allowed others to make decisions for me or for my organization that only I should have made. And I have lived to regret and rue the day, for God has given to me that cosmic spanking to show me the absolute dilemma and the debacle that occurs at any moment that I would leave my post of decision-making on those matters which only I can decide. Then there are the areas where it is absolutely essential that I delegate responsibility and decision-making power, and therefore to know Which of the two is which is an important factor in itself in decision making. Each and every one of us knows what it is like to be a child. Take the hand of a parent, be carefree, and trust that we will be led and guided, taken care of, kept warm and fed, and tucked in at night. Wise is the parent who leaves off continuous holding the hand, caring for and protecting the child. Children must come to abrupt realizations that if they do not exercise their limbs, their mind, their heart, they may not eat, they may not have a sweater or a coat, or they may not take the right path to the house of grandmother. Children who are brought up overly protected or by powerful parents who make all decisions want to find the same in a spouse, in a government, in society. Therefore, let us understand the role of parent to actually give to the child a certain conditioning to the world as it is and not in the ideal state. Teaching children to fend for themselves is extremely important at an early age. A simple act of cutting food for a child of 3 is depriving him of his individual creativity and the demand to find out how to cut that food so he can eat when he is hungry. Simple tasks that interfere with the development of that Christhood and individuality can make your child dependent not upon a true shepherd, but a false teacher in later years. Succumbing to the idolater seems to be the fate of the evolutions of earth, and thus we must strive to make decisions. We must not allow ourselves to be block-headed, bull-headed, stubborn, and prefer the mechanization way, following only rules without realization that no rule can cover life. No rule can get you home to God. No formula. There are exceptions to every rule. And you must know when an exception is in order, and you must know when exceptions can cost a war, when exceptions are an act of rebellion. You must know the difference, and you can only know by the exercise of the threefold flame of your heart, of your own Christ self. And you need to get that indecision, that self-pity, that doubt and fear into the flame, and stop quaking and trembling, and follow the heart of Christ that is with you, as surely as that heart is in the ascended Master or the Guru. You have a living teacher with you, and you must go through those steps of listening and obeying, and trusting and obeying when you do not understand why the inner voice says, go here, go there, do this, do that. Who would ever think that the Christ self or the voice of conscience is a tyrant? Why, I have never even conceived of such a thought. Yet my Christ self speaks to me with a command and a voice of authority. And because I hear the authority, I know the voice. I know it is true, and I follow. And therefore, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid of the command of your heart. Welcome it, but realize that the command is given for you to internalize the logic of the command. When you find out why your Christ self told you to do something, and all the circumstances involved, ponder a moment so that you understand why your Christ self drew the conclusion and gave the direction. Did you think that your Christ self does not have to figure things out? Did you think it's like instant God or mind? God thinks and cogitates. He makes up his mind to create or not to create. There is a logic to the mind of God everywhere, especially in your real self. Your real self is an expert in the logos, the power of the logic of the word. You need to be students of logic, because I find that students have gaps in reasoning and do not know why they do the things they do and cannot offer a decent explanation. I am much more interested in your learning why you drew the wrong conclusion than I am in punishing you. And that reflects the state of God consciousness. God wants you to learn how to figure out your place in the sun, to make reasonable, right, and lawful conclusions given the perplexities and circumstances of a tired planet, a weary world filled with cross-currents of karma, decisions that at best must sometimes be a compromise. But we take the compromise. It's the nearest right. It's the highest we can do. It's the best. And if we do it, we put our stake on higher ground. And then when we come up to that ground by our conclusion, we can find a better world and make newer and better decisions that are closer and closer and closer to divine reality. We don't gain the infinite freedom all at once. But if we deny so much as a matchstick of freedom in our life or in our neighbor's life, we are putting out a candle of freedom that could light a world. And therefore, every freedom that you fail to exercise creatively becomes a shackle and a bondage. This is why your thoughts, your cogitation, your creativity, what you do with your energy for God every day so counts. It counts, and you must not loll along unthinkingly. You must be thinking all the time. Waking and sleeping, the cosmic Christ has that motion of the universe, of the cosmic creation within you, and a part of it applies to your very specific project. However small it may be, the mind of Christ is there to engender excellence so that you can learn through every act how to contact infinity. Let us consider areas of control. Let us consider how they happened, why they are still with us, and what we, the individual, will do about it. The economy. The manipulation of the economy is one of the oldest and most profound forms of social control. What is the manipulation of the economy? It is the manipulation of the free flow of God's energy over your crystal cord from your mighty iron presence to your heart beating in all of its shining splendor. That is the manipulation of the economy, and that is where it begins. And the only place the crystal cord can be violated is in the nexus of your free will, in other words, your attention. All of the riches of this world, all of the resources come from the crystal cord, direct from the heart of God. And therefore we are in control if we want to be, because our heart flame, our decision making, the lever of what we give and do not give, of that energy, determines where the economy will be. What are they manipulating? They're manipulating our light, our abundance, our energy, our consciousness, and the sacred labor of our hand, which is our work, and all of this goes back to energy, the flow over the crystal cord. The economy is not something out there, this other thing that they're manipulating. The economy moves through every person in our society. We are part of the economy. We feed it daily by the labor of our hearts. We are the economy. We are being manipulated. Inflation and wage and price controls have been more or less a constant fixture in civilization for the last 40 centuries. Inflations are psychologically destabilizing, contribute to the maldistribution of scarce resources, aid some people while harming others by design, are one of the important causes of wars and revolutions, and create the climate for complete government intervention, that is, complete government control. And the control of the government is always the control of the economy. Once the government controls the economy, the abundant life, the free flow of God's energy from the source to man, it controls the life of its citizens, the very lifeblood and life force. Just look at the Soviet Union, where the government is the sole employer. You have one employer whom you work for, and that is your Christ self. Your Christ self is your employer, and your Christ self is represented in every job you hold. And you hold the immaculate concept of the Christ for that employer, and no matter what manifests through him or her, you find the lesson that your inner teacher, your inner guru desires to teach you, and you submit until God delivers you. The instruction of be content with your wages, obey those who are over you, and it is for a purpose. You are earning your way to the one you would like to work for directly, Saint Germain El Moria Dwal Kul, and they are waiting for you. They are waiting for you to pass your tests in the schoolroom of life. So the Soviet Union as the superstate has replaced the Christ self of its citizens. We are currently coming out of a recession characterized by high unemployment, high interest rates, numerous business and bank failures, and a decline in the rate of production. This recession was largely cured by reinflation of the economy. A euphoria has hit our people. But unless we go back on a gold standard, the only means available to the government to halt the inflation will cause another recession. Conversely, the only way to end the recession is to reinflate the economy, setting off another wave of inflation. We have decided to get off of this yo-yo merry-go-round of the fallen ones. Going back on the gold standard is like going back on the standard of your Christ consciousness. It's like straightening the axis of the earth. If you do it all at once, there's going to be a rumbling. There's going to be a cataclysm. There's going to be a big, big problem. But nevertheless, going back on the gold standard becomes mandatory. And if we don't, we will continue to vacillate in a series of inflation recession cycles of ever greater intensity until the government either seizes control of the economy and stabilizes prices through wage and price controls, or we suffer a depression or a hyperinflationary collapse. The very cycles themselves give momentum to the shaking of the body politic. Back and forth, the momentum builds until finally there is such a quaking and a shaking as to create an economic cataclysm. Historically, price controls have always produced shortages because the government sets the price of goods below their market value. Sellers are then unwilling or unable to make their goods available. For example, in the winter of 1977, price controls on natural gas prevented certain areas of the United States, suffering freezing weather, from obtaining additional supplies from the producing region in the South and Southwest. At that time, the Federal Power Commission set a price ceiling of $1.42 per 1,000 cubic feet for natural gas shipped across state lines. Intrastate natural gas, gas produced and sold exclusively within any state, was outside of the jurisdiction of the Federal Power Commission and free of price controls. Intrastate gas was selling for $2 per 1,000 cubic feet. Obviously, it was more profitable for suppliers to sell natural gas in the states where it was produced, such as Texas and Louisiana, than to sell it out of state. As a result, New Jersey and Pennsylvania, which were not gas producers and which were suffering from cold weather, could not bid the price up and buy more gas, even though they were willing to do so. Even though almost everyone now agrees that huge deficits are harmful, neither the President nor the Democrats or the Republicans in Congress can seem to control the budget. Yet the people want to ratify an amendment for the balancing of the budget. How we are going to ever balance the budget is totally beyond my outer comprehension. Someone proposed that the federal government put up for sale all federal lands that it owns in order to pay off the deficit. Price fixing is a deadly assault on the free enterprise system. It comes about because one manipulation begets another. The monopolies manipulate our laws. They manipulate the free flow of trade, the interaction of competition, which is lawful and just, the small businessman. Government regulations increase the inequities, and then the creation of money by the Fed devaluates the dollar. Economic crisis looms, and so the answer is the Band-Aid of price fixing. Now Congress is proposing working on new legislation to solve this problem, the problem of natural gas and of price fixing, price controls. But in the past, every time the government intervened in the gas market, it made the problem worse. Multiply this across the board of all commodities in the nation, and you see what chaos we would have if the solution finally came back to price controls because of runaway inflation. The huge deficits of our budget may become institutionalized. David Stockman recently said he saw $200 billion deficits extending as far as the eye could see. These deficits will drastically amplify current inflationary and recessionary trends and may even precipitate the next great economic crisis. We cannot hope to solve our economic problems until we deal with the problem of the Federal Reserve System. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution specifically gives power to coin our nation's money to the Congress. This is a non-transferable power. Congress can no more give complete control over our money to the Fed than it can give the war-making power to an association of munitions manufacturers. And yet it has. This seems to be the sleeping secret of America, the power, the presence, the privacy of the Federal Reserve Board. It's going to take more work, keepers of the flame. And I'm afraid to say it, but it's true. Saturday night St. Germain services will not do any longer to stem the tide of inequities that are moving against America and for total control. We need more intense sessions on these issues. It's up to you to do it by the love of your hearts, by your creative necessity of your own souls. To consider these realities, look at the energy of the day and your life, and determine what you are willing to make room for and what you are not willing to make room for. There is a certain psychology that you must realize, that if the leaders of this organization continually tell you, you must come to this decree session or that decree session, the very fact of being told from without builds resistance. Far better it be your own idea, your own determination of getting together with a group of people on a certain project, dedicating yourselves to do it, and you have no one else to report to but your own heart, your own Christ self. It is your idea, your insert, your research, your campaign, however far you wish to run with it. It is necessary to take dominion over the earth and take responsibility, but you must find this necessity in your heart. And the only way to find it is to look at the future, the handwriting on the wall, what it will bring, what it will do, and what hopes you have for your children or the children you see all around you. The necessity of your own heart will be the mother of invention of your own path of adeptship and attainment. You carve out a cosmic destiny. You decide what you will major in as you become a career son and daughter of God. You decide what you will take accountability for in this nation, and then you go about it with absolute scientific discovery, with determination, applying everything you know and the fullness of your heart's courage. And you know what you find in the process. Your flame expands and expands. You discover God inside of you. You find His power to do anything. And you know that in that power there is an increase and an increase. And you find yourself becoming knowledgeable in a subject, moving with people who have the same cause at heart. You find yourself becoming an authority. You'll find yourself being sought after. But you never, never fail to go into your closet and pray daily. And you know, God in me, not I, but God in me, will work this work for the turning of this particular world. God has demonstrated a magnificent science before our very eyes, an immense miracle of grace. But it is also a fruit that must be plucked. In all of its shining, we have to have a desire. And desire means getting rid of all of those knots of lesser desires and having one pure stream of the river of life flowing that is not diverted here and there, so that the full power of the river of life in us flows through us and becomes out of our bellies as waters of life, of healing. This is the greatest moment of independent action of the disciples of Jesus Christ and the keepers of the flame of Saint Germain, right here in the economy. Let's begin with a Federal Reserve. As it now stands, the power over our nation's money was given to a monopoly. The Fed was conceived and passed into law as a result of a conspiracy of the bankers, principally Morgan and Rockefeller, and is still run primarily by bankers and big businessmen. They have the most to gain through the manipulation of our money. Among other things, the Fed is an engine of inflation. While inflation hurts everyone else, it serves the bankers' short-term needs by giving them new money to lend at a profit. Although this wreaks havoc with the economy, the bankers are unaccountable to the people of this nation for their actions. Non-accountability is the sin of all of these would-be leaders who are no leaders at all. Non-accountability because they have no heart, no threefold flame, no Christ self, no accountability to the Christ above them and to the order of a cosmic hierarchy, no accountability to the people under them, no heart. We cannot allow the heartless, godless ones to have this shroud that stands between the people and the nation and Almighty God and the hosts of the Lord. And at the Federal Reserve is the very core of the problem of the economy of this nation. Take the case in point, the international debt bomb, the huge uncollectible sums of money lent by Western banks to developing and Eastern Bloc nations. Many of these loans will never be repaid, which places our banking system and hence our economy in ultimate jeopardy. None of this would have happened in the first place had there not been inflation. The bankers simply would not have had the huge surpluses of dollars to lend. Now that the damage is done, the bankers would like Congress to transfer wealth from the United States Treasury to the International Monetary Fund. The IMF would then lend it to the third world nations, who could then repay the bankers. All out of your pocket, my pocket, out of the very light from the source that flows over the crystal cord, the sacred labor of heart, head, and hand of the American people. Besides being a circuitous form of bailout, large transfers of wealth over long periods of time deplete the economy and lower the general standard of living. The rationale for the bailout is that without it, the banks may collapse and cause great damage to the economy. The bankers tell us, we are indispensable, therefore you must bail us out because you need us. But the bailout forces the taxpayer to foot the bill for the bankers' indiscreet lending practices. Let us raise the right hand and say, thus far and no farther. Thus far and no farther. Thus far